Good evening. Dan is on assignment tonight. I'm John Roberts. President Bush made good today on his postponed promise to unveil a new U.S. policy for the Middle East. And in doing so, he withdrew the American support long enjoyed by Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. At the same time, the president held out an offer of U.S. backing, including economic aid, for a democratic state once a list of conditions is met, especially an end to terror attacks against Israel. Bill Plant has more from the White House.
In a speech delayed for a week by violence in the Mideast and by divided opinions in his own cabinet, President Bush told Palestinians more directly than ever before that the first step toward provisional statehood is getting rid of Yasser Arafat.
Peace requires a new and different Palestinian leadership so that a Palestinian state can be born.
But Mr. Bush made it clear there can be no birth of a new Palestinian nation without a complete end to terror.
And the United States will not support the establishment of a Palestinian state until its leaders engage in a sustained fight against the terrorists and dismantle their infrastructure.
And setting a very high bar, the president also demanded not only new leadership, but also a new constitution, new financial and legal institutions, and a new security service, a top-to-bottom overhaul. As for Israel, Mr. Bush called for an end to settlement activity in the occupied territories and a withdrawal to positions Israel held at the beginning of the current fighting in September 2000.
With intensive effort by all, this agreement could be reached within 3 years from now.
The U.S. has been under pressure from Arab states to take the lead in laying out a statehood plan to give Palestinians hope. A Saudi spokesman was encouraged.
Now we know that the President of the United States thinks of a Palestinian state on essentially all of the West Bank and Gaza within 3 years. Now let's hope that the Israeli Prime Minister buys into that.
The Israelis shouldn't have much problem, but the Palestinians might. Mr. Bush has left two issues which are potential deal breakers until later: the future of Jerusalem and the right of the Palestinians to return to the lands on which they lived before there was a Jewish state. John?
Bill Plant from the White House tonight on the president's new Mideast proposal. In the Middle East tonight, reaction to the president's speech is predictably mixed. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon is enthusiastic, and while Yasser Arafat is trying to put the best face on it he can, one of his aides calls the idea of replacing Arafat, quote, not acceptable. Correspondent David Hawkins reports.
For more than 3 million Palestinians now living under Israeli military curfew, the president's words may be too little, too late, and ask too much. The removal of Palestinian Authority President Yasser Arafat from power before there'll be any prospect of a Palestinian state. Israeli officials say they're pleased with the president's speech, but objected to his call for the creation of a provisional Palestinian state in 18 months. Palestinian officials say they already have an elected leader, Yasser Arafat. And Arafat leads in the polls ahead of elections already scheduled for the end of the year that he agreed to under intense international and domestic pressure. Palestinian officials, though, say they welcome the effort to move the peace process forward.
The speech of President Bush included many positive principles for a final solution to the conflict, especially that it included the principle of ending the Israeli occupation.
Palestinians have long insisted that it's Israel's occupation which causes violence and terrorism, not the other way around. Israel's reoccupation
we're ready.
Territory is now almost complete. Israeli tanks now prowl the streets of all but one West Bank city. And in Gaza today, Israeli helicopters fired rockets at 2 taxis. The target, a Hamas activist accused of planning an attack against Israeli soldiers there. 5 others were also killed, sparking protests and still more calls for revenge. Palestinian officials don't believe that Sharon is interested in peace at all, and that Israel's actions are guaranteed to make matters worse. President Bush's approval of those actions, they say, aren't likely to make things much better. David Hawkins, CBS News, Tel Aviv.